Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today. I have a really neat guest, and I am super excited to bring her to you guys. So, Susan, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Thank you, Kat, for having me, and I'm really excited to talk to your audience.
Yay, thank you so much. This has been a long time coming, so I'm really excited to be able to really dive into this conversation. So Susan, as we get started, please do us all a favor and tell us who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into this space.
So my name is Susan Brady, and I started out my career back in 1989, so 35 years ago, as a physical therapist. And pretty early in my career, I started noticing that my patients who ate right and took better care of themselves, managed their stress and their sleep, they got better faster than patients that sat on a couch and ate a junk food diet and really weren't taking care of themselves. So I ended up then pursuing a doctorate in integrative medicine because I just started realizing that, we're not just about one thing. We have to have an integrative approach to our health. And from there, the aspect of integrative medicine that I felt I could bring back to my patients was mostly nutrition. So I went on and got a certification in nutrition, and I opened up a practice in integrative health. And I started to become inundated with women who were worried about their bone health and the osteoporosis, and they were having DEXA scans done, and the doctors were saying to them, oh, you're going to fall and break a leg and be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. And they were confused. They were healthy. They didn't understand. And the doctors wanted them to take these medications, and then the patients were finding that some of these medications had pretty substantial side effects. So they were looking for a holistic alternative approach to bone health. And at that point, I was kind of like a jack of all trades, just under the nutrition umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
But I really started to dive into osteoporosis and started reading everything I could get my hands on in regards to osteoporosis. And I came up with a very holistic approach. And since then, I do dabble in other areas of nutrition, but my focus these days is on a holistic approach to building strong, healthy bones. So that's kind of where I've come from. I've been, in the physical therapy world for 35 years, and I've just kind of integrated the rest into my practice. And actually, it's been a very nice marriage between physical therapy, which is so important when it comes to bone health, and then the nutrition and the more integrative approach, looking at other things like stress and sleep and digestion and all the other aspects that go into our health.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense too. So my background is in medical. I did more in administration, but I was kind of a jack of all trades when I was at a smaller office. And so I learned a lot about the bone health and especially your spine and different things like that. But like how all of these different pieces and components of us are so tied together. And it really is interesting, especially after doing a lot of my own healing and stuff as well, to see how my body dramatically changed from reducing my levels of stress and being able to manage other items and areas in my life, and how that has amazingly affected me now versus 10 years ago. And so I'm curious, you know, because you've done both physical therapy and you're kind of hyper focused now on this osteoporosis, do you do you see that this is more of a woman issue, or are you still seeing this with our men as well?
I would say primarily women. I think the stats are 1 out of 2 women will develop osteoporosis as they age, and
Wow.
I think it's 1 out of 4 to 5 men. And basically, the whole reason why we lose bone at age, as we age, is because for women, it's estrogen, and estrogen for most of our lives is very bone protective, so it protects our bones. But then when we start to go through menopause and our estrogen levels start to decline, that's when we start to lose bone. And the same thing is for men. Testosterone for most of their lives also protected their bones. And women go through menopause. Men go through something called andropause. And they start to get a decline in testosterone, so that makes them more susceptible to osteoporosis. But I would say the biggest difference is even though both sexes end up with a decline in hormones, one of the things that's really, really important towards bone is force and
Mm,
force through the bone. There's something called Wolff's Law. And what that says is the greater force you put through the bone or through anything, it is going to get stronger in order to be able to accommodate to that force. Well, men are typically larger than women. So on a day-to-day basis, every step they take, everything they do, they're creating more force through that bone. So it's going to allow them to maintain better bone density than women. And if you actually see the population of women that have a tendency towards osteoporosis and bone loss, it is the smaller petite women.
hmm.
And that is because, at 100 pounds, it's hard to put a lot of force through the bone, and the bone's going to
Yeah.
accommodate to what it has to do. So if it only has to carry around 100 pounds every day, that's the strongest it's going to get, is to carry around 100 pounds every day. But I also think this is where some of the problems lie with tests like DEXA scans, which is the x-ray that looks at bone density, is because somebody that's 100 pounds and 5 feet, they're going to have smaller bones than somebody that is 5'8" and weighs 150 pounds. It just makes more sense.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of question as to whether these DEXA scans, how accurate they really are, because you can have less dense bone, but the bone you have could be a very, very good quality, right? So
Okay.
bone has to have a little bit of give to it, right? If it was just a piece of glass, every time you fell, your bones would shatter. It has to
Hmm.
have a little give, and that's more of the quality of the bone. So you could have less dense bone, but the bone you have is of greater quality. You could fall and not fracture, and vice versa. You could have denser bones, but of poor quality and fall and not fracture. And I've seen this in people. I've had a 50-year-old patient who she had a little bit of bone loss, but nothing significant. But she had a high stress job, didn't eat well, never exercised, sedentary job. She had 3 fractures in 1 year. And then,
Oh,
then
wow.
I had a 75-year-old woman who had really bad what we call T scores, which is the kind of what the result is that you get from a DEXA scan. But she ate well, she exercised every day. She fell down a set of steps and never broke a bone.
Oh
So
my goodness.
if you were just to look at these two women on paper, you'd be like, oh,
Hmm.
she's not going to break a bone. Oh my gosh, she's at high risk of breaking a bone. So it's not all about the DEXA scans and the density. There's so much more that goes into it.
That makes so much sense. And you know what's interesting too is we tend to think that we can push through stress, and because we have like a vacation or this getaway or like time to ourselves, that like makes up for it, when in reality it really plays out across your lifespan. Now I'm curious to know, and I'm sure a lot of people are probably wondering this too, let's say, for instance, you kind of had a really good life and then you went through like a really stressful period, but you've kind of hit that period, like, let's say in your mid 50s, where you're already noticing that you're starting to lose it. But then you kind of start getting back into healthier habits, less stress, and things like that. Can the bone reverse itself, or just does it protect itself better? Is it kind of like once the damage is there, it's there, but you can at least protect it from further?
So what I have seen is it's very, very hard to reverse osteoporosis. It's hard to reverse that bone loss unless there is something medically that's an issue. So for instance, parathyroid disease actually causes bone loss. So if you can correct, if you do have something like parathyroid disease or thyroid disease, which may be driving the bone loss, that certainly can be reversed, and you can start to see better bone density after that. But for most people, once you've lost that bone, it's very hard to regain. And so, but here's the thing is your bone quality and density starts in your adolescent years. That is when we build the most bone we are ever going to have in our life. And it's up until about the age of 25 in men, 28 in females. And it's called peak bone mass. And so we really, really want to build that bone in our adolescent, teenage, young adult lives. Because let's say we get to peak bone mass and then we go through menopause, we are absolutely going to lose some bone through menopause. But if we've reached peak bone mass and now we're going through menopause, we're still okay. But if you never reach that peak bone mass because you were a couch potato as a teenager, maybe you smoked, maybe you drank, you didn't do any exercise, you ate a junk food diet, and you never reach that peak bone mass, now when you go through menopause or andropause and you start to lose bone, you're into the osteoporosis. So and I wish that more people would be focusing on this in our young adults because it's crucial. And I see so many young adults with issues like anorexia, and my daughter is a runner, so I've grown up with all of these young women, running. And when you're a distance runner, the lighter you are, the faster you run. So
Hmm.
so many of her friends had anorexia back in high school and in college. Um, and I worry about them now when they go through menopause because I'm sure they never built you know peak bone mass because they didn't eat when they were that age. And so I do think that our medical community needs to really educate our young women and young men about the importance of our bones. But unfortunately, your bones lie deep inside, so they're kind of out of sight, out of mind, and nobody even
Yeah.
thinks about it, especially as a young person, you feel like you're invincible and you're like, oh, that's never going to happen to me. And then all of a sudden, you're 55 and you fall and break a bone. You can't go backwards at that point.
Hmm.
But again, it does so much of it does come back to the quality of the bone. And a couple things that we do know is the stronger your muscles are, the stronger your bones are going to be because your bones have to follow your muscles, right? Because if your muscles are really, really strong, but your bone isn't keeping up with that, you could lift a 20-pound weight and the force of the muscle in the bone would just fracture the bone. So the bone has to follow the muscle. So we do know that people that work out and stay strong tend to have better bone quality, maybe not the density, but definitely the quality. And we do have these new tests coming out, and I'm very much on top of this new technology. It's a REMS technology through a company called Echolite, and it's actually an ultrasound opposed to an X-ray, and it gives you both bone density as well as bone quality. And
Oh,
for me, this has been awesome because again, I'll have these women coming into me. They take great care of themselves, they eat right, they exercise every day, they're healthy as can be, and yet they're being told that they have bones of a 90-year-old in terms of density. But then when we do these REMS echolites, and yeah, maybe their T scores aren't great and their density isn't great, but their quality is great.
mm,
And so this test also gives you a fragility score, which is 5 years risk of fracture. And, the risk of fracture is like 3%. Whereas,
wow.
a doctor looking at a DEXA scan would say, oh my gosh, you fall down, you're going to be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. So I do think that a lot of technology is coming around to better evaluate bone health, which I think is really, really important. Because I don't think, there's a time and place for medication. But so many of these medications today, once you start, you can never stop them. Because what
Yeah.
happens is you end up losing more bone the first year after you stop that medication than you were losing previously. So there's a
Wow.
lot of things that need to be taken into consideration when you're dealing with bone health. And for the medical community, the way they're educated is you have this diagnosis, you get this medication.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, I think people are starting to understand and come around to the fact, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's see if there's something I can do with other aspects like nutrition. I also focus a lot on digestion and gut health because it's so important in terms of health throughout the body.
Yeah. And you know what's interesting too? I was thinking about this when you were talking about the way that your muscles protect your bone and how it can keep them healthier, right? And I think about this because I was always a very athletic, very fit in sports, like doing all the things kind of a person. And it wasn't until probably about 15 years ago when I did something to my lower back. And I realized, like now thinking back to that, that at that point in time, I had literally like stopped everything. I was working a full-time medical job. I was sitting a lot. I maybe walked around the block at lunchtime, but I was working 50 hours or more a week. And so there wasn't a lot of time to really do anything else. And I went from being really, really active to not really doing much of anything. And then, like, that's when I started noticing, like, oh, I had a back issue. And then, like, my knee started popping, like, all these things started happening. And it's so funny because I got back into working out again and I actually injured myself recently. And I told my husband, I was like, I have to get back into working out because I've noticed that when I take those long breaks, that's when I start realizing that things start happening or things start hurting because there isn't a muscle mass there to protect it, to continue to build. It's just whatever you have right at that point in time. I also want to touch base on nutrition because it's so important regardless of age. And I think that this is going to be for anyone that has kids and teenagers, or if you're a young adult. But what is your take on what you consider to be a nutritional diet? I feel like there's so many things, and some people say take all these vitamins and do all this stuff or eat only this fruit and vegetable. And I feel like there's a lot more to it than that. So I'm curious to know your take on the nutrition piece.
So I think a couple things. I think nutrition is the foundation of our health. I mean, you have to put gas in your car in order to drive. You have to put nutrients in your body for your body to run. And I think I made a mistake when my kids were in third grade giving a lecture on nutrition. It was right after 9/11, so this wasn't the best analogy. But I said if you go to a junkyard and you get junk metal to buy a plane and the plane goes up made of junk metal, it's probably going to crash. But if you no, But if you build that plane out of quality materials, it's not going to crash. So I think it's the same thing. When you put in junk food, your body doesn't know what to do with it. It's looking at
Hmm.
all these Frankenstein foods that we have, all these man-made chemicals that we're putting in our body, and it doesn't know what to do with it, and it can't use it for energy and metabolism and cell differentiation and regrowth and rebuilding our bodies. And our bodies are turning over cells every single day, and they need these nutrients in order to make quality cells and quality tissues. So I do think that the nutrition piece is critical. I'm a huge believer in food first. I know everybody wants to take these supplements. Supplements are just that. They are to supplement a diet when you're not getting the nutrients you need from your food. And and the other thing is, there's so many different diets out there and everybody swears by a different diet. But what I
Yeah.
find is interesting is the foundation of all of these diets is typically, getting rid of junk food. And so is one of the reasons why all these diets might work for different people is because you're just getting the crap out of their diet. So they're actually getting real food. I don't know anyone that's been healthy eating a junk food diet. But if you look at like the paleo diet, very high in vegetables. They take out all of the processed foods. I mean, if you look at any of
Hmm.
these diets, the very first thing they do is remove the processed foods. And so I think that's why you see some of these diets working for various people. I am not big on any one diet. There's a couple of things that I look at is, I do believe that plants need to be the foundation. I think, fruits and vegetables and legumes and nuts and seeds needs to be the basis of our diet, just because that is where we get the most nutrients from, the most minerals and vitamins and things like that. Now, whether people want to be vegan or vegetarian or omnivores, it doesn't matter that much to me as long as
Hmm.
people that are vegans and vegetarians are really trying to get the protein that they need. I know a lot of people that are what I just call junk food vegetarians. They basically live off of bread, butter, and cheese and don't eat any vegetables at all. So I do think that any diet can be healthy if you're really trying, hard to make sure all the pieces fit. But I think the most important thing is that it works for you, because if it doesn't work for you, it's not sustainable. And it has to, you have to have some kind of sustainable eating program, right? Because diets don't work because you go on them for 2 weeks and maybe you eliminate carbohydrates or you eliminate this or you eliminate that. Well, you can do it for 2 weeks and get healthy and lose some weight, but can you do it for the rest of your life? And that is, I think, what's key is finding an eating pattern that you can do for the rest of your life and be sustained on it, because so many of these diets will not sustain you, and you can't. So there,
Yeah.
I think people have to look at things that way. I always tell my patients when you're dishing out your plate, half of that plate should be fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, then you can have your protein and your complex carbohydrate. But think back, I don't know about you, but when I grew up, we were given a huge plate of spaghetti and tomato sauce. You know, where's the protein? And so I think we've come a long way from that. And again, back in the 80s, we were so fat phobic. Nobody ate fat, but boy, did we eat carbohydrates, and everybody got really fat.
Love my pastas. Love my pastas.
And I think the other thing that really is important is diversity in diet. And I always try and get my patients to eat 20 to 30 different plant foods a week.
Ooh.
So it actually isn't as hard as you think it is. But, if you ate the same food every single day, and maybe it's a healthy diet, maybe you ate broccoli every day, but you're missing out on all the other nutrients that come from all the different foods, right?
Hmm.
So even if you're eating a healthy diet, if it's the same food every day, it doesn't necessarily mean you're getting all the nutrients you need. And here's the other thing, we talked a little bit about gut health. all of these different fibers from these plant foods feed the good bacteria in our gut, right? And if we're only getting certain fibers from certain plant foods all the time, we're only feeding certain gut bacteria. And not only do we need trillions of these bacteria in our gut, we need a huge diversity of these bacteria in our gut. So you need a diverse diet in order to feed the diversity of the bacteria in the gut microbiome. So, I mean, it's not that hard. I usually have people just kind of write down every plant food, and that is your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, your nuts, your seeds, and just, changing things up as the week goes on. Maybe Monday you have broccoli, Tuesday you have cauliflower, Wednesday you have asparagus, Thursday you have, just changing it up a little bit every day, I think is really, really important, and diversity of the diet.
And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you think about it, even if you simplify it down to, let's see, you work at a job and you walk 2 miles a day. Well, at the beginning, that may seem like a lot to you, but after being in that job for so long, your body is so used to you doing that same thing over and over and over again. It's like, okay, well, this is normal. This
Mhm.
isn't doing anything for us. So that's really interesting. I didn't realize that there were that many different components to having the diversity of, especially around gut health, because I've heard a lot about gut health. This has been something that I know that people are talking about a lot more than I've ever heard before, because I was a pasta kid. That was my Italian family. It was pasta and it was bread. And I'm the opposite, where I don't really touch any of that. I do try to also, I have smaller plates so that if I know that I need to eat something, I put what's on that plate instead of having this big giant plate and then needing to throw it away or feeling like I need to eat it because it's there. But I love that you're coming back to the simple fact that any diet can work for anyone. You just have to figure out which one works specifically for you. And I love that you said that, because I don't think that a lot of people realize that, or we get in these conversations, or we hear some type of ad where it's like you can lose 20 pounds in 1 month, and it's like that's great and all, but it's kind of like the get rich quick schemes, I feel like, and not a lot of people pay attention to that because they're just trying to get rid of the weight and feel better about themselves, instead of realizing that this should be a lifelong thing that you want to continue building within your body. Just like when you think about personal development, when you go through healing yourself and you go through personal development, you don't just like do it for a year or two and you're like, okay, I'm good, I'm totally healed, don't need any more. Like, it's a constant way to grow. It's a constant thing for you to, oh, let's try this. Oh, this looks better, this has been working for me more. Hey, I've done this for years, but let's try something else. You're constantly challenging yourself so that you can continue to grow. And I feel like that's the same thing with nutrition and body health as well. Is this is for the long haul. This is something you want to continue doing. This is how you continue the growth of your body to maintain it in the direction that's going to give you longevity, versus feeling like, oh, I can just do this diet for a couple of months, and then once I lose the weight, we're great, I can go back to it. And then you find these people that like do the detoxes. Nothing against anybody that does detoxes. I've done them before, but like people that like that's what they do every year, right? They detox like midsummer and then they detox in the wintertime. They're like, oh, I'm good now and I can go back to what I'm doing. And it's like, no, no, you just undid all of the good that you gave your body a chance to do. And then you wonder why you fluctuate. You wonder why your brain fog maybe is showing up. You wonder why you are lethargic when before you weren't. And it's like because you allowed yourself to clear things out. Your body's starting to feel good. And then you go right back into those patterns because you're like, oh, we're good now. And your body's like, oh, time out, time out. I thought we were
Right,
done.
right. You haven't learned anything. If you go on a grapefruit diet and eat, grapefruit 3 times a day for 2 weeks to lose 10 pounds, what have you learned?
Yeah.
You just go straight back to your regular diet, and in 2 months you're going to be have all that weight back on you. So it has to be something that you can sustain. And I also think that it's also a very individual thing. And I'll tell you a kind of a personal story. I was wearing one of these continuous glucose monitors for a while because my husband was having some issues with high blood sugar, so I wanted him to use it. And then we decided that I would use one at the same time, and we would track what our blood sugars would do after the same meal.
Ooh.
And, his would go up and stay high. Mine would go up, go up a little bit and come back down. But I was very much into intermittent fasting. And, 7 o'clock, kitchen's closed. You don't eat anything after 7 o'clock until 11 o'clock the next morning. But
Hmm.
I was continually waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't understand why. And this has been for, years. And it was just kind of a pattern. Well, as soon as I used that continuous glucose monitor, all of a sudden the alarms are going off at 3 o'clock in the morning because my blood sugar is 50.
Oh, wow.
So what I learned, and I've never had blood sugar issues my entire life, I am somebody that has to eat before I go to bed. And as soon as I was having a piece of cheese or, something with a little fat and a little bit of protein to sustain my blood sugar overnight, I've been sleeping like a baby. So
How
this is
interesting.
why it isn't a one fix for everybody. Everybody is different, and you've kind of and this is where someone like me comes in, because we can kind of decipher what's good for you, what's not good for you. And then there are a lot of different food intolerances. People will say, oh, every time I eat cheese, I get a stuffy nose or a skin rash. And then we have to, you got to figure out why people are having all of these different intolerances. And sometimes one of the reasons why we become tolerant to a food is because all we do is eat it all the time.
Mm,
And so that's what I find very interesting, is when I do some of these food inflammatory tests or food intolerance tests, is they come up with all the food that somebody's eating every single day. And if you actually look at, I like to go back to kind of prehistoric man. They didn't eat the same food every single day, right? They ate seasonally. When they got
mhm.
meat, sure, they ate a lot of meat, but then they'd have to go and forage whatever seasonal berries or nuts or
Yeah.
things were out there. So, um, you know, when in our modern world, you can get any food you want any time of year. And so people get into these habits of just eating the same thing day after day after day. And I think that can create problems too.
That makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about, going back to kind of prehistoric times and looking at the way that they were eating,
Mhm.
and all of that. And that makes a lot of sense. And I do think that that's kind of an issue, is because we do have everything at our fingertips. And so it's so easy to just be lazy and be like, oh, I'm craving this, so I'm just going to do this. Or, oh, I feel like this because I don't want to cook, so I'm just going to do this. My husband and I have even been really, more aware of when we do things like that. Because sometimes if we're traveling, you're eating out, right? So it's like, okay, if we are going to eat out, how can we do something a little bit different? Maybe we like binge on this one meal that we're just like so in love with, but then, okay, then the next one we're going to do a salad and do something else and maybe do something a little lighter and give the body a rest and stuff like that. So we've learned to be a little bit more conscious and aware of as we're eating those foods, even if we do decide to go eat out, so that we aren't just putting in whatever fat, lazy, greased things is out there, because it's so easy to do, right? There's always some type of burger joint that's down the street. There's always some type of, Mexican restaurant or Taco Bell, or, like there's all of these horrible things for you. And so you really have to be not only aware, but willing to be like, okay, this is what I'm craving. What could I have that's maybe a healthier option? And does that mean I have to drive a little bit further? Sure. Does that mean I have to maybe order it? Fine. But at least you're being aware of a little bit more of what you are putting in your body, which I think is anything when it comes to mind and body, is being aware of what you are intaking, whether it's your stress levels, whether it is food, whether it is the type of exercise that you're doing, like being aware of what you are doing to your body and what you are putting in it, because ultimately you are molding the direction that your body is going to go as you age. So oh, I've learned so many things. I honestly didn't know that much about osteoporosis. I mean, even being in the medical field, I just knew that like you got old, you got holes in your bones is what we kind of associated it with, right? And then like you could break things. But this makes so much more sense. And I think it also takes the scare factor out of it, as well as like there are things that you can do. There are things that you can help to maybe not necessarily prevent, but create the longevity of it so that you don't run into these issues. And I love the piece of advocating for yourself when you do go for these tests, because and I've talked about this on my podcast several times recently, of like doctors are amazing, They're really great at what they do. And we should know our bodies better than anyone. And so being very aware of that and realizing that, like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't agree with that. What research can you do? What can you bring back and say, hey, look, I actually looked at this. This is what I'm feeling. This is what's going on. This is what I think I need to do. And working with your doctor instead of us just blindly listening to everything that they say, because they're human too. They make mistakes. It's just part of the human person, right? And I think that a lot of people are starting to get a little bit more away from that, where they are starting to make sure they understand things a little bit more and paying attention to their body more, so that there is a little less of mistakes that can happen.
Well, and I think, you know, unfortunately, with our medical system these days, these poor doctors only have 7 minutes to see you. So
Yeah.
how much can they really do in 7 minutes?
Yeah.
And, you know, I've heard some of my patients will say, you know, I went in with some problem, but another issue came up days before, and I wanted to bring that up. And the doctor said, you're going to have to make another appointment because that's a totally different, you know, topic.
Yeah.
And you can't kind of blame them. It's kind of the system that we have right now, which I do think is failing the American people, because I think that we have become reactive with our health instead of proactive with our health. And I do think that if we started to focus more on nutrition and lifestyle and exercise at a very young age with our kids, we would be a healthier society. And looking at, you know, our modern farming practices where we're using all of these pesticides and GMOs. I mean, our food isn't even as healthy as it was. We have less nutrients in our food today than we did 20, 30 years ago, because our soil is so depleted, because of, you know, these farming practices. And I don't blame the
Mm-hmm.
farmers. I mean, they have to make a living. They have to, you know, they're trying to make food for the population, so they're doing the best they can. So
Mm-hmm.
I do think that things need to change a little bit in terms of how we're looking at things. And here's the thing: do you realize that insurance, medical insurance, won't even cover a nutrition consult? And what is more foundational and preventative to our health than nutrition? And
Yeah.
they don't cover it. So, and people do still think, I mean, I think people are starting to understand they're not going to get all they can get out of the medical system just by using insurance and conventional medical services. And they're starting to be willing to pay more out of pocket for things, because I'm a completely cash practice. I tried to take insurance for a while, but it would take me hours to fill out these forms and fight with the insurance company to get somebody $20. I'm like, it's not worth
Mm-hmm.
my time. I can't do that. Um, but this is the issue, is that these insurance companies aren't really paying for the preventative medicine. And what could be more preventative than nutrition and lifestyle? And I would love to even see these companies giving stipends for gyms and things like that to get people more active.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I don't know. We got a long ways to go with that.
I think we're learning though. There's a lot more knowledge, there's a lot more information, there's a lot more people coming forward, and I do feel like that is the first turning point, right? But I do agree with you. Even working in the medical field, it really frustrated me to know that, like, the first thing that everybody gets is some type of medication, some type of prescription, versus sitting down and being able to have a conversation to understand the underlying issues. You know, I was very blessed to work with a lot of patients in therapy, and when I did get to have conversations with them, and I did find out things that they were doing at home and stuff that was going on in their family. And those kinds of conversations make a huge difference in, you know, everything else in your life. And just being able to talk with them about that sometimes gave them a little bit of relief. And so I do think that I would love to see our medical go more integrative, where we are listening to both the symptoms, but also to the patient as well, to be able to make a more refined decision on that one. So, Susan, I can't thank you enough. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, just, I love this kind of stuff. As we come to a close, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yes. So I think we alluded to it before, your bones may lie deep within your body, but they are the foundation of your body's strength and stability. Just think about it. If you don't have bones, you'd be a puddle on the ground. And if you do not take care of your bones, they will weaken over time. But here's the integrative approach. Because every system in your body is interconnected, anything you do for your bone health is also going to support your entire well-being, and vice versa. So when you invest in your bones, you're building a healthier, stronger, more vibrant you from the inside out.
I love that. That's such a great message. What a good thing to end on. So, Susan, do us all a favor then and tell everybody, how can they connect with you? How can they find you? How can they be in your world?
So you can go to my website, nurturedbones.com. So I am Nurtured Bones. And best thing to do if you want more information is book a free 20-minute call. Happy to jump on a call, discuss any issues you have with your bones or nutrition. Happy to do either one and see if it's a good match and we can work together.
I love that so much. Susan, thank you again so much for being a part of the podcast today and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
You are so welcome to everybody else out there. I hope you really, really are starting to hear this theme that has been coming over the podcast the last several months, and that really is this advocacy and understanding of our own selves and being present with ourselves and being the person to say, nope, I don't agree with this. This is what I know that I need. We do have other ways to be helped through things when we are struggling, but we need to get back to understanding ourselves and trusting when we know that our bodies are telling us something different. So, so much information here today. Do some research, reach out to Susan, have a conversation. I think that this is so, so important. And again, I'm a woman and there's so many things around osteoporosis and menopause and all these things that I'm not even aware of. And you would think that because I'm female, I would know. So do your research, reach out to someone that can give you that information, that can start showing you what you can do better to start having a more sustainable, fulfilling, and long life. And until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.